Hey, everybody. Let's cycle over. I'm flying a little solo here tonight. Let's make sure all is well. Good. Hey, everybody, live from Denver. It's Friday night. I should have anyway. I'm really glad you're here to joining me tonight to talk and go over things and let me maybe teach you some things. We're gonna have an interesting show tonight. I've got papers, lots of them, and I got a lot of stuff to go over with you guys tonight. This might be more. I hope this will be more interesting than you even expect or imagine it will be. So as you can see, I am not joined unfortunately by my beautiful wife Melissa. She is still just as beautiful as ever, but a little under the weather. She's feeling a little sick. She's got a little cough, so we're gonna let her rest this evening, and that's what she's doing just 100 feet away. So anyway, so that's what we've got going tonight. I see some of the usual suspects in the chat here. This is very good. Oh, I'll bet that's true. I'll bet that's true about the Jehovah's Witnesses becoming more litigious. Okay, let's see. I don't want to waste a lot of time, but I do want to give folks some minutes to catch up and get here and get onto the live stream. So let's go ahead and do some of our usual stuff. I did not get a quote from Melissa, but I did go and get some. I get some snuggles, not struggles came, and boy, was Benson useful this week. in terms of snuggles, not struggles. Oh, well, not sure what to say on that sound. Okay, let me go back over to the thing and make sure I'm on the right mic. Properties. Yeah, we should be. Oh, how about that? That should do it. That was probably on the wrong mic setting, so I hope that is now fixed. You should be able to hear either way, but now the sync there should be less of a sync problem now, because there's two settings I use on my mics, and one of them has this delay and the other one doesn't, and it's just a side effect, I guess you could say, of using the ATEM. To plug in. There we go. So it should be synced back up again now. Thank you for letting me know about that, because it's not always obvious which mic I'm using since they both have sound. Okay. Okay, so I was getting over to our Snuggles Not Struggles cam. Anyway, there he is. There is our little bundle of furry joy. And he's not exactly super joyful here today. He was a little tired. In fact, this is during one of his sort of non-peak moments. He was a maniac today. We had like 3 or 4 different runs, up and down the hall, playing with him. And he just got pooped. So he was sitting there and he was so chill and so I think he's just right on the edge of falling asleep. So I was just making sure everything was okay with you. You okay, little buddy? And he's fine. He's just tired is all. So anyway, snuggles, not struggles, right? But this guy was absolutely a wonderful, little support dog this week for me. He does not have an official role as a support animal, but he certainly fills those shoes quite well. He is, I think we've mentioned before how sort of emotionally empathic he is with us. He picks up on us, on our moods right away, and if we're down or we're feeling stressed or me or Mel or both of us, he's right there, and he's like, he paws you and he comes up and he really tries to be a comfort. There is no question about this. It's happened so many times. I Bark Twain, yes. So yeah, he was just wonderful. Okay, now before we get into the meat of anything today, somebody asked me a question before the show started in the chat, and they just said, Chris, I realize it can't happen, but it would be so great if the Aftermath Foundation and SPTV could work together against Scientology. Please share what you think about this. I feel there are good people in both groups. And I'm going to say that I agree that there are good people in both groups. And I agree that it would be great if, you know, people could work together. But bridges have been burned. It's not going to happen. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it, because I don't want to get into a big, long spiel about all that. I got a lot of other stuff I want to talk about tonight. So since you asked, that's my answer. And that's all I have to say about it at this time. Okay. So let's get to some things. Let me just make sure that we're all good. Okay. Yep. All right. Taco Bell. I wanted to start tonight talking about Taco Bell. For those of you who've watched me for a while, I think you know I've mentioned this before, but I haven't really told this whole story or, you know, talked about this at the way I'm about to. But Taco Bell has always held a very special place in my heart. Taco Bell has always been a go-to, a stop, a rest place, a wonderful respite, a cheap, economical, to say the least. You know, historically speaking, Taco Bell was always the, you know, if you had $5 in your pocket, I could go to Taco Bell and fill up. No problem. You know, and I used to eat significantly more than I eat now, but even back then, $5, the Taco Bell burrito was, somehow there was some magic ingredients or magic dust that they just, you know, sprinkled over that or threw in with the cheese that somehow made that thing so filling. And if I had a taco and a burrito or a couple tacos or whatever, you know, and some nachos with that cheesy sauce, I was good to go. Sometimes I could just have the nachos, but I love Taco Bell. And at least I loved Taco Bell. But my experience with it became gradually over time worse and worse and worse. But because I had so many fond memories of it growing up, through my time on staff where I could go and get a meal and it was cheap and I could actually afford it and fill up. I mean, Taco Bell saved my life in some ways. You know, a little bit. It was there for me. You know, I could run to the border and Taco Bell would always be there for me, ready to take my order. You know, everything was always like just above the boards with them. And I never felt that they were anything more than they said they were. That was the other thing about Taco Bell, is I never felt they were misrepresenting themselves. You know, I never felt like they were trying to con me or something. It was what it was. It's cheap ass Americanized Mexican food, right? And that's what that's all it has any pretense to be. So, but over the years, my stomach would be, I would be taking out more and more punishment on my body by eating this stuff. And you'd think, if we were rational, sensible creatures, if I were a normal, regular, common sense driven person, then you'd think after, you know, once or twice, bad instances, stomach convulsions, you know, like nausea, like next day problems, like, you know, you'd think after once or twice of that, you go, oh, hey, you know, this isn't any good for me. But no, that's not what happens at all, is it? Instead, I would let some time go by. And I would not forget about what happened in the past, but I would just sort of lose the, oh God, I'm never going there again. Like you would sort of have this resolve, you know, like after the second time, it was like, oh, I really got to stop doing this. I think I was in my 40s at this point, right? And I was like, oh, this is kids' food. I cannot be doing this. But about 6 months later, I'm driving down the road. I'm hungry. doing, dong, there's a Taco Bell. And there's $5 in my pocket, and I could still load up. Maybe now it's $7 or $8, maybe it's $10, but it's still, I can fill up for cheap. So I go there again. There's the beacon, the light, the bell ringing, and they're ready to take my order, and I'm ready to give it. So I, go through the drive-through, and I've got all these memories still from my childhood and my younger times. I'm not remembering the last time I ate this. I'm remembering all those wonderful times that I had with it. Oh, this is going to be great. And I take a bite, and it's got that Taco Bell taste with those Taco Bell seasonings and that Taco Bell hot sauce. And here we go, right? And it feels so good for about 20 minutes, fill up, and whoa, right? Like the thick Coke and the chips and the cheese, and suddenly this is not mixing so well. And I feel horrible. I feel awful. I feel like shit. I got to stop this. Oh my God. And here we are right back at square zero again for the third time. I got to stop this. This is bad. This is bad. Another 6 months go by, another 8 months go by, right? Like I've resolved not doing that again, So driving down the road, walking down the street, I'm with a friend, whatever. Hey, Taco Bell, right? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. Because, I'm again remembering, hey, I had a bad experience or two, but maybe that was just, maybe that was just that was a fluke. Maybe that was just silly, right? Maybe I just had a couple bad meals or something, right? So here we go, round number 4. All the same, all the usual, and, not so great feeling afterwards. And I again resolved to do that. A year goes by this time. Literally, I actually, this actually happened. This is a true story. And here we go one more time. And I literally told myself the 5th time, okay, this will be it, right? And it was. Because it was just as bad as the 4 times that came before it. It took me 5 times before it finally came all the way through to me. This is not just a one-off or whatever, or an aberration. This is not a mutant taco you had. This food just ain't for you anymore. Maybe at one time it was, but it's not now. And next time, no fire sauce, right? And so this is why there are lessons to be learned in life that sometimes take more than one time, right? More than 2 times, more times than would make sense for it to take, more times than anybody would ever imagine it would take or should take. It just takes what it takes, doesn't it? And this is why, me and social media don't mix so well sometimes. And it is what it is, But every time you try to get a little bit better, you try to do a little bit better, and that's all you can do. You recognize this ain't for me, this ain't good, whatever, and you move on, right? And you keep learning the lesson until you finally learn it. And I think there's a life lesson there. So I thought I would share that, which leads to more. This is just the beginning here, okay? So I wanted to share the Taco Bell story because I don't think I'm alone in this. In fact, I'm 100% positive I'm not. If we as human beings were able to just have a bad experience, analyze it critically, skeptically go over the facts and determine, okay, from this point forward in my life, this is what I'm going to do different, and have it stick, we would be living in a very, very different world, wouldn't we? But we can't. We don't. This isn't how we are. And I've said, I've said before that, remember how I'm always saying that people are complicated? Answers about, thinking and emotions and emotional needs and cult beliefs and extreme beliefs and the psychology that we get into, on this channel a lot. It's complicated. There's a lot of layers. I talk about layers. I like thinking about it that way. It's an easy way to talk about stuff. And the brain is kind of a hidden in plain sight layer of complication that has effects on us, and there are consequences of our brain that in our behavior, in our speech, in our actions, in our beliefs, that are not obvious to us that that's where it's coming from, or that that's what the problem is. We assign social reasons or ego reasons, or we come down on our temperament or our lack of a control of our emotions, or we tell ourselves these stories of ourselves about why we act the way we do and why we do what we do. But we can't tell ourselves a very true story if we don't have all the facts about what's actually going on up here, or about what's actually going on in the world around us, or how complicated we really are. And I think that is an important thing to kind of springboard from, because then you could be maybe a little more open and receptive to not being so down on yourself. I'm down on myself all the time, because maybe there's just something going on that isn't so obvious, isn't so easy to understand, doesn't leap out at you as an obvious answer or problem, and yet it's been sitting there hiding in plain sight the entire time. And tonight I want to talk to you about some aspect of that, and what this has to do with ADHD. Which is a condition that I have been diagnosed with and take medication for, and I'm trying to deal with. And learning about it, and learning more and more and more and more about it has made certain things pop out as like, oh, wait a minute. You mean some of this might have something to do with my ADHD or with people's ADHD in general? What? It's not the first thing or the second thing or the third thing that I've ever thought of when I look inward into myself to try to see what's going on. And I wonder how many of us who may have this condition to one degree or another, it is a spectrum disorder. I wonder, how often do we actually correctly look to that condition as to what might be going on with us? Because it's a little complicated, okay? And here's how I guess I wanted to start with this is, because we've talked about this before, and I know some of you who are watching this right now have an ADHD diagnosis, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get it, and you get how people don't get it. And you get how when you learn more and more and more about it, of your own condition, you start having some eye-popping moments. Some, oh, wow, is that, kind of moments. At least that's what I have. And boy, is it interesting. So I wanted to first start by explaining something, though, or at least analogizing something, okay? This is probably rough. This probably has all kinds of problems with it as an analogy, but let me throw it out anyway. Neurotypical people who have ADHD is a neurological condition. It's not a choice you're making. It's not a moral failing that you have. It's not a disease you catch. It is not a bug you get, and it's not indicative of something you did wrong, and it's not something that you get because you were traumatized. It's a neurological condition, and it has to do with executive functions and how well your brain processes or deals with certain types of information or certain types of behaviors under certain conditions, which is really broad, right? Like, what else is new, Chris? Everything in the brain could be described that way. But that's the point, is it's in the brain. It's not in your stomach. It's not in your toes. It's not, some nerve condition. It's a brain condition. And the neurons in the brain of a person who has ADHD just don't work the same way as they work in people who are quote unquote neurotypical. Your average American, your average normal human being, I should say, doesn't have this condition. And so there is often a barrier between trying to explain to somebody who doesn't have this and never experienced it and has no idea what it feels like, to try to explain what this is, because it is literally all in your head. And it is all in your head. But it emerges through your mouth, through your senses, through your ideas, through your actions. This condition makes itself pretty damn obvious sometimes, and sometimes not so obvious. And so you could compare, this is again, probably a rough analogy, but if you're trying to get down the road to go somewhere, your neurotypical is, let's say in a Lamborghini, and they're going, and it's, and they're got the floor, the foot on the pedal, and they can get there from, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and it's not a problem, and boom, there they are. And they wonder why you, traveling in your VW Bug, can't keep up. And they, because here's the tricky part, right, is they see your VW Bug and it looks like a Lamborghini too. Because on the outside, we all look the same. We all look normal, right? But you're not driving a Lamborghini. You're driving a Bug. And it's going to get you where you want to go. It's it will get you there. But the difference between a ride in a Lamborghini and a ride in a VW Bug is different. It's a different experience for the people in the car. And odds are, if you're in a Bug, and you're driving down the road, something about that experience is going to be non-optimum or non-fun, or something's going to, tick you off or distract you or annoy you along the way. And that's just part of the experience of having that condition, is that things come up. And they are things that don't come up for other people. And because this is something that you grow up with, that it's diagnosed as it goes all the way back to childhood. And I got some things to tell you about that later. You normalize it. When you have it, you normalize it. This is normal. This is how my life is, and this is how my brain is, and this is how I think, and all that. And you're kind of, you're dispersed. It's easy to get distracted. It is hard to focus on a specific thing when you want to. Yet sometimes it is impossible not to focus on something. Hyper focus on something at the weirdest times for the weirdest reasons. And sometimes it's right in alignment with what you want to do, and you can hyper focus and boom, it's like a superpower. But those are few and far between compared to the times that it's distracting the hell out of you and making your life difficult. It's a balance. It's a balancing act, and it's one that people with this condition walk. And when you don't know you have it, you have all kinds of other explanations for what's going on. But once you realize you have it, you get diagnosed and you start learning about it, oh, wow, do things start gaining a lot more clarity in your life. Yeah, right? So disabilities don't have to define us or our limitations, but we do have to acknowledge that they are real if we're going to be honest with ourselves, honest with the people around us, and able to do something about it. You can't compensate or deal with something like this if you are in denial about it. Right? So, and neither can anybody else. If other people can be in denial about this condition just as much as you can be, right? I mean, we run into it. So, yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So, I came across a paper that I wanted to share with you guys, and I'm going to, after the show, I will get the link to this paper, to this article, which has citations in it. This is good stuff. This is not just some blog article. This is a doctor talking about doctor stuff with ADHD that we're going to go over here tonight. Okay, and I thought this was so goddamn fascinating that I just couldn't wait to share it with you, because it focuses in on a specific aspect of ADHD that I didn't know even existed. I was aware of how I could see others act in this way that this paper describes, but I never attributed it to or had any idea that it was connected with ADHD at all. I was thinking it was trauma-based, it was often some other thing. No, apparently not. Apparently not. And what I'm talking about here, now this is interesting. Okay, the paper is called New Insights into Rejection-Sensitive Dysphoria. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria. What is that? It's not a formal diagnosis. It's a common and disruptive manifestation of emotional dysregulation. Okay, so emotional dysregulation, what do you think that means? Right? Maybe this person has some issues regulating their emotions. This is one of the characteristics of ADHD. It's not a trauma-based thing. It's an ADHD thing. Now, that doesn't say that trauma doesn't also cause emotional dysregulation. But we can parse these things out. Trauma is not required for this whole thing with an ADHD setup or person, right? You don't have to have trauma for this to be happening. A common but under-researched and oft misunderstood symptom of ADHD, particularly in adults. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria is a brain-based symptom, all right? It's up here. That is likely an innate feature of ADHD. Likely. Okay, this is still under research as I understand it, but we're gonna go over that. Though the experience of rejection-sensitive dysphoria can be painful and even traumatic, RSD is not thought to be caused by trauma, as I've been saying. Dysphoria is the Greek word meaning unbearable. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Dysphoria means unbearable. Its use emphasizes the severe physical and emotional pain suffered by people with RSD, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, when they encounter real or perceived rejection, criticism, or teasing. The emotional intensity of RSD is described by my patients, this is the writer, as a wound. And the writer, by the way, is William Dodson, a medical doctor. And a psychologist, treating, yeah, okay. Okay, so rejection, criticism, teasing, you can have this response. And it can be quite an interesting set of responses. And it's an emotionally intense response. This falls under the category of emotional dysregulation. 1/3 of my adult patients report that RSD was the most impairing aspect of their personal experience of ADHD. 1/3. In part because they never found any effective ways to manage or cope with the pain. Okay, so it's sometimes called hysteroid dysphoria in Europe, and rejection-sensitive dysphoria is characterized by intense mood shifts triggered by a distinct episode, typically one of the following: rejection. Again, it can be real or perceived, but the person feels rejected, or teasing or criticism, no matter how constructive, or persistent self-criticism or negative self-talk prompted by a real or perceived failure. In other words, you can set this up on your own negative feedback loop and do it to yourself and actually really do it to yourself. No joke. The new mood sweeps in immediately and it matches the individual's perception of the trigger. If these triggered emotions are internalized, the person can instantly appear as if they have a full major mood disorder syndrome, complete with suicidal thinking. These can be powerful experiences. I believe I have had these, and I find this absolutely fascinating. If the feelings are externalized, they are commonly expressed as a rage at the person or situation that wounded them so severely. The mood returns to normal very quickly so that a person with ADHD can have multiple episodes of mood dysregulation in a single day. Many people with RSD say it's always been a part of their lives. However, some report growing significantly more sensitive in adolescence, which I believe would be for pretty obvious reasons given how we treat each other as adolescents. Individuals, okay, so let's get into a list here of what we're talking about. I hope this is making sense so far because I think this is absolutely fascinating. Individuals suffering from rejection sensitive dysphoria may exhibit the following behaviors. Okay, so here's our list. Sudden emotional outbursts following real or perceived criticism or rejection. Withdrawal from social situations. Negative self-talk and thoughts of self-harm. Avoidance of social settings in which they might fail or be criticized. For this reason, RSD is often hard to distinguish from social anxiety disorder. That piqued my interest a lot. Low self-esteem and poor self-perception. Constant harsh and negative self-talk that leads them to become their own worst enemy. Rumination and perseveration. Now, this is an interesting one. I might not be saying that word right, perseveration, but that word means basically being stuck in a kind of a mental loop where you're fixated or stuck in an idea or an action that you can't really break out of. And this is the kind of thing where you keep writing the same word on a piece of paper over and over again. Or, you got food in front of you, you put it in your mouth, but you don't chew it, you don't do anything. It's this kind of extreme thing. And it's one of the characteristics of this, or it can be one of the behaviors of this. But it doesn't, if you're not doing that, it doesn't mean this isn't going on. Relationship problems is the last on the list, especially feeling constantly attacked and responding defensively. What does it feel like? The excruciating pain of RSD is often beyond description. Patients describe the intensity of RSD as awful, terrible, catastrophic, or devastating, but they cannot verbalize the quality of the emotional experience. Now, no one likes to be rejected, criticized, or to be seen as a failure. This is obvious, right? It's not like anybody assumes that neurotypicals can just brush it off and it's no big deal. Nobody wants to fail. Nobody wants to be criticized. That's for sure. It is unpleasant, so people avoid those situations if they can. RSD is distinguished by its extreme, unbearable intensity, which sets it apart from normal emotional responses familiar to people who are neurotypical. This intense pain is often experienced as a physical wound. The patient feels as if they were stabbed or punched in the chest. Commonly, people will hunch over, grimace, and clutch their chests when they describe their RSD experience. Now, here's how we can differentiate this from mood swings or a mood disorder, and this is stuff I was fascinated to learn about. Mood changes are something that happens with everybody all throughout the day. There's nothing wrong with your mood changing or swinging around from day to day, from moment to moment, hour to hour. There's nothing weird or abnormal about that. A mood disorder is when your mood is swinging or changing in ways that you're not under control of and are not comfortable with, you don't like it. Mood disorders are characterized by the following. They are untriggered. They kind of come out of the blue. You just suddenly feel weird or bad or angry or fearful for no good reason at all. There's no trigger. They are independent of what is going on in the person's life. It's gradual over weeks. The mood swings can change, but it's a slow kind of a process, not a quick kind of thing. Offset of mood episode is gradual over a period of weeks to months, and the duration of the episode must be greater than 2 weeks. When you're talking about mood disorders, that's what you're talking about. This RSD and the ADHD is a very different thing from that. So if you've heard of mood disorders or people who have them, that's not what I'm talking about today. RSD and ADHD has these characteristics. The mood changes always have a very clear trigger. The mood matches the perception of the trigger. In other words, if the trigger pisses you off, you're pissed, right? It matches up. The mood shift is instantaneous. The episodes end quickly. in a matter of hours, and the episodes rarely last more than a couple of hours. In other words, the moods of ADHD and RSD are normal in every way except their intensity. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria is not included in the DSM. It is not a formal symptom of ADHD in the United States. However, emotional dysregulation is, and that's what this whole thing falls under. It's one of the 6 fundamental features used to diagnose ADHD in the European Union. Now, let's go over a couple of things that you guys might find really interesting. I certainly did about this. It is widely understood that the diagnostic criteria for ADHD only fit well with elementary school children and have never been validated in a group of people over the age of 16. Now, that's interesting. Like, what? How is that possible? Well, read on. They are based on only observational or behavioral criteria that can be seen and counted. The traditional diagnostic criteria intentionally avoid symptoms associated with emotion, thinking styles, relationships, sleeping, etc., because these features are hard to quantify. Because when I first read this, I was like, what do you mean there's no studies on adults? What are you talking about? But then when you start looking into emotional dysregulation and you start trying to figure out, how do you count this? How do you quantify this? How do you get people to give you feedback so that when Bill tells you it's a category 5 pain, he's communicating to you something that is roughly the same as what Sally is experiencing when she says to you that it's a level 5 pain or emotion, right? How do you take a subjective experience and turn it into a quantifiable number that you can use in a study and replicate, right? Show it over and over again. This is a really big problem. This is a hard problem to solve with human beings, because you ask the average person about their emotional life or experiences, you are going to get some of the wildest descriptions and answers you've ever thought about. But is what they're saying and their experience of it what you're getting from the words they're using, because they're only using the best words they have to describe feelings and subjective experiences. This makes social sciences and the so-called soft sciences very, very hard to quantify, as opposed to chemistry or engineering, where you have things that you measure and weigh, and it's very easy to see. Humans are a lot harder with this, and this is one of the reasons why this has been difficult to study. For clinicians who work with later adolescents and adults, the DSM criteria are almost useless because they ignore so much which is vital to understanding how people with an ADHD nervous system experience their lives. When people started writing and researching the concepts of RSD and emotional dysregulation about 5 years ago, this new awareness of the emotional component of ADHD was enthusiastically accepted by patients and their families because they matched their life experiences so exactly, right? Just like I'm sitting here right now reading this and going, holy shit, this guy nailed it. This is exactly how my life has been for 10 years, for my whole life when it comes to this specific thing. But nobody's ever talked to me about this before, brought it to my attention, or pointed out that it's an absolute part of the ADHD criteria and the ADHD phenomenon, right? It's not trauma-based. It's not cult-based. It's something different. Now, again, that's not to say for you or anybody who's watching this in the future that some of what's going on with you couldn't be trauma-based or otherwise based. I'm not trying to diagnose anybody on, any of you guys right now. I'm just trying to give you some data. How this works in your life, you got to figure out. But I found this very clarifying for me. because clinicians and researchers weren't so keen on this whole concept because of the research problem. They didn't grasp that the emotional component of ADHD had always been there, but intentionally not pursued. People don't realize this. It appeared to them that the concept had no real and historical basis. What's more, there was very little published research just 5 years ago, and most studies came from the European Union, which used the term emotional dysregulation. Okay. So, there has been a rapid increase in available research in a very short period of time, and the redefinition of adult ADHD in the EU, adding the emotional self-regulation as a fundamental part of the criteria, has further assured that RSD is really a thing that cannot be ignored any longer. So there are still at least 3 reasons why emotional dysregulation may never be included in the criteria, though. 1, it's not always present. It comes in triggered episodes. 2, people with RSD are usually ashamed of their overreactions and hide them so that they will not be further embarrassed and thought of as mentally or emotionally unstable. And 3, even when it's present, it can't be measured and therefore can't get published in research. As a consequence, emotional dysregulation was consciously excluded from the diagnostic criteria for ADHD and effectively forgotten for many years. Over the last decade, researchers have developed several new ways of looking at ADHD through the life cycle. By the end of 2019, this reevaluation of the very fundamental aspects of ADHD led the European Union to issue its 10-year update, and they redefined adolescent and adult ADHD to include difficulty with emotional regulation. So if you're in the EU, this has been looked into, studied, talked about, published, and nobody's got a problem with this. Or it's not as controversial as it would be, say, over here. So this is still being worked on. But here's what I wanted to share with you. 6 fundamental features of ADHD. Inattention and hyperfocus, as I kind of described earlier. Impulsivity. Hyperactivity. Emotional dysregulation, as we've been going over. Excessive mind wandering. And behavioral self-regulation, which they equated with executive function deficits. So, you have a hard time regulating yourself, okay, which of course fits in with some of these other things. The type of emotional dysregulation seen in the type of emotional dysregulation seen in ADHD has been characterized as deficient self-regulation of emotional symptoms such as irritability, frustration, and anger, and low frustration tolerance, temper outbursts, emotional impulsivity, and mood lability. Emotional dysregulation in ADHD is different from episodic symptoms such as marked sustained irritability occurring within the context of altered mood states. Okay, so it's getting a little academic there, so I'm going to stop reading from that. But in ADHD, emotional symptoms tend to reflect short-lived, exaggerated changes, often in response to daily events with rapid return to baseline within a few hours. That's what I wanted to share, right? That encapsulated idea. It happens, it's quick, it's hours. If you consider hours quick as opposed to days or weeks or months of the experience, and you return back to a normal after after a period of time, the angst, the excessive emotional dysregulation sort of dies down. And I am just going to say, I cannot count at all on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10 hands the number of times since getting out of Scientology that this has happened to me. And I have wondered about trauma and about anger management and about this and that. And I've done things and dealt with those things and had improvements in those things. And like I said, I've even sat here and told you guys I feel like recovered from Scientology in terms of the effect it had on my thinking. True enough, but that doesn't mean I'm a perfect human being any more than anybody else is. And so, with ADHD and with depression, you get a whole new bag of tricks that comes along with this stuff that has that is different from the cult experience or baggage, but can be mixed up with it or perceived as it. And I wanted to share all this with you guys today because this is a way of kind of, taking some of this apart and sort of deconstructing some of this in a really interesting way, especially when you start thinking about the fact that some of this is coming from just straight out of your brain. It's not your moral failings, or you have no integrity or character, or you'd have no ability to regulate your own emotions or something. It's just some of us are a little bit more deficient in this than others. And I just was like, wow, that is interesting. And this is a huge change in thinking. A feature of ADHD that was ignored for 50 years now is rapidly becoming one of the defining features of the syndrome in both the EU and North America. And this paper, by the way, then I will post a link to this in the notes for the show here in the description section today. I'll get that up after the show here tonight. Cites a number of papers as references for this as well. You can look all this stuff up, okay? And I wanted to share for any of you who may be wondering or thinking, oh, maybe some of this applies to me too. Well, let me share as a last bit here some of what's being done about this. Oh, hey, 13 months of membership, Juliana, awesome. No, Scientology does not cause ADHD. It's a neurological condition. But could it exacerbate the symptoms of it because of its authoritarian controlling structure? Oh, hell yes, it can. Ugh, one of these days we'll have to have a little talk about that. I'm still figuring this stuff out, right? I mean, obviously, digging into this now is a whole new, sort of take on ADHD. So there are drugs that have been approved by the FDA for the treatment of ADHD for decades, and they were not directly associated with the terms of rejection sensitivity and emotional dysregulation for all the reasons that we've already gone over. Nonetheless, it has been this author's here clinical experience and the experience of others that the symptoms of RSD can be significantly relieved. He cites clonidine and guanfacine. I think I'm saying that right, guanfacine, in about 60% of adolescents and adults. So, 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5 look like they get significant relief from these medications, clonidine and guanfacine. Again, I hope I'm saying that right. This strongly indicates that RSD is neurological and not something that is due to a lack of skills. Skills do not come in pill form. I love that line in here. There currently exists no formal research on using alpha agonist medications. Okay, we're not going to go there, but come to realize the armor's not needed. There are people who have started on certain medications with this who then learn how to better regulate their emotional life while they're on the medication to the point where they don't even need to continue being on the medication. And I thought that was a real light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. So that's in here as well. Now, if a patient does not benefit from medication, they have little control over an episode of RSD once it begins. The incidents have to run their course. Some people with ADHD, however, report that getting interested in something new and fascinating can help end an RSD episode more quickly than it would otherwise. And this goes along with something I wanted to throw out there that I've sort of used in my own life that has been kind of interesting to mess with my own ADHD and my own habituation of things is some days or sometimes I will flip the script on myself. And where I'm left-handed, I will take the day and I will write with my right hand. Just to flip the script on my body, just to throw it out a little bit. So I have to think a little bit more, be a little bit more present with what I'm doing. And it makes my brain activate in a way that it kind of prevents certain other parts of my brain from dysfunctioning. It's not a cure-all or anything like that. It's a coping mechanism, but I thought it would be, something useful to share, and it kind of aligned with what this guy was writing here. Now, this is interesting. He says that in my clinical experience, neither coaching nor traditional psychological or behavioral therapies like CBT or DBT offer any prevention or relief from impairments. Nonetheless, many people report that it is very helpful for them to know that this highly disruptive experience is real, common, and shared by other people with ADHD. Quote, "It helps me to know what is happening to me and that it is ultimately going to end," end quote. And I agree completely. I could not, that's why I was so eager to share this with you guys, because this is like, kind of one of those hidden gem kind of things of like, wait a minute, that's what's been going on all this time? What? It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it, and then you can start doing something about it. And it's not even like you're living in denial when you don't know about this or you're not doing something about it. How could you deny what you don't even know about? It's that, well, you don't know what you don't know thing. And this is why I think learning, especially when it comes to a post-cult situation or a post-coercive situation where you're really trying to get yourself back together again, or maybe in some cases get yourself together where you never were together, in certain areas or in certain ways. And isn't that like a positive growth forward? It's not just dealing with the negative. It's, it's like some positive movement forward. I think that's pretty cool. So I wanted to share that with you guys tonight. Okay. And, I don't go to Taco Bell anymore. I actually did conquer that. It took, like I said, though, it took 5 times of, having to teach yourself and condition myself and, stop all the bullshit to myself and stop lying to myself. There's a lot of things that had to happen for me to stop going to Taco Bell. But it's just bad for you. And how many times do you have to learn the lesson? Well, I guess for me it was 5. And I wonder, that this and other things don't have something to do with that. Certainly ADHD does. It just does. So I guess what I'm putting out there today is that, when it comes to cult recovery and the phenomena that we run into with trauma and with PTSD or complex PTSD, and with the weird beliefs and indoctrination that we're having to unlearn and overcome, on top of all that baggage, if you got the ADHD baggage too, there's a lot. It's a lot. And it might not be super obvious in the moment, or even when you sit and think about it, it might not be so obvious where it's coming from. Where different problems or triggers or episodes you may have had, where was that coming from? Was it the cult? Was it Well, that's why we have professionals to advise us and help us with that stuff. So, see a therapist or read some books or dig into this and find out more for yourself. But here's a little bit, on the way. And you can see I'm pretty excited about this because it has... It has opened up some very, very interesting things for me, but more importantly, it has removed some reasons for a lot of negative self-talk that, has been in my mind for my entire life. And I'm sure we all could use a boost with that. I'm sure all of us could use a hand when it comes to those negative feedback loops that we get trapped in sometimes. It's like this little cul-de-sac from hell where there's these loudspeakers in your mind just telling you what a shithead you are, and you're just caught in this loop, for hours, days, it feels like sometimes. You just can't give yourself a break. And That's not good, is it? But it's not enough to just know, oh, well, I'm traumatized, so of course I'm down on myself. Maybe not. Maybe there's more to it than that. And maybe there's other remedies for it besides going and getting trauma therapy or getting, cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is great stuff, but it doesn't handle what it doesn't handle. So just some more things to think about. And another, I got to say again, right, a sort of a restatement of just how complicated we really are as human beings. We ain't simple. We got a lot going on upstairs. And then you add our whole social, cultural thing to it, and we're just one little unit, in a big hive of society. And you have all those pressures and all those influences on you, as well as what you're generating inside here. It's amazing any of us stay sane at all, some days, isn't it? A lot of influences out there, but the more you know, right? So, all right, so there you go. Fluffy, that's a good point. I find cutting out junk food and sugary fit and drink has helped my anxiety. Not really sure there is a correlation, but I think having healthier intake of nutritious food has helped. Fluffy, I will support that statement 7 days a week. I am not great at it myself, but it's still true, and it's still something I've heard from doctor after doctor. In fact, there was a neuroscientist. Somebody sent me a video recently where a neuroscientist who had quit, gave up his job, right? He was done. He was finished. He was over with that. And he was hiking up in the mountains. I don't know if you guys saw this video, but he was talking about the fact of spine surgery and back surgery and how a healthy diet and a fit body, not, Schwarzenegger fit, just, taking care of yourself, solves so many problems, back problems, disc problems where people thought they needed surgery and they kind of tweaked some things in their life, and they didn't need back surgery anymore. They responded better to the back surgery. I found that very, very interesting, so I'll just share that with you guys. Leslie saw that. Yeah. So I just wondering why JD Vance likes Mountain Dew. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, like I said, we're all going to develop our own things. You guys are commenting on some of this, and it's awesome. So there you go. I hope that this show today was helpful and useful in some fashion, and opening up another door to understanding of these conditions that some of us have and how that can get in our way in trying to navigate life. And certainly trying to navigate cult recovery, and certainly trying to navigate getting along with other people, man. Ugh. All right. Now, this weekend, you guys are getting a podcast tomorrow that I hope you guys will enjoy. Unfortunately, it's not that bad. I mean, it's definitely, I'm posting it. It's not atrocious, but it is a little bassy, a little filtered hearing my guest on the podcast tomorrow. I'll just get that out of the way right now. But Dr. Clint Haycock is back, and he and I had a great talk about Project 2025 and Christian nationalism, which is a topic I've been a little keen to be talking about lately for pretty obvious ideological reasons in our country. I see Christian nationalism as a threat to our national situation. I do. I see it as a direct threat. I see them as the American Taliban. That's how I like calling them. And I'm very, very concerned about that. If you want to know about cults that I'm really concerned about, it's Christian nationalists, the dominionists, right? These evangelicals who, have just lost their goddamn minds. So Clint and I had a great talk about that. And if you guys are lucky and super nice, then maybe we'll do a live stream this week too. We might be setting up something like that to really get into the deets on Project 2025. This podcast tomorrow is a bit of an overview. History, some of the players, we get into some of the stuff. But I want to do more. I want to do more on that. And I hope you guys will join for that. Because, it is straight up crazy sauce. And yes, Dylan, I totally hear you on that. I somehow let 2 shows go through last week without checking that they were mono and that the 2 channels were set on the audio. 100% my bad. Definitely mea culpa. Sorry about that. So I'm definitely making sure that's not a problem this week. You will have a live critical Q&A, and we will be doing that at the usual time of 1 o'clock. Now, the Headleys this week are going live for their Q&A at 2 o'clock my time. So we're only going to go for an hour. I usually, you know, sometimes we've been doing these hour and a half, 2-hour Q&A shows, but I'm gonna cut it off at 2 because I don't want there to be a conflict between viewership or whatever. But of course, if I'm off the rails on that and you guys want to keep going at 2 and that's where we're at, then we can do that. Well, you guys will let me know when we're doing the live. But we'll have that there. Cyprian, I have been in email touch with him within the last month or two. He's actually running for office out in D.C. right now. And yeah, so he's on the Republican side, by the way. So anyway, he's kind of doing that, and that's what that's the update on him. Yeah, that Project 2025 stuff is really wild. I can't wait to go over that stuff with you. It is wall to wall crazy, and a real statement of, yeah. So many things, actually. It's hard to summarize, right? Because it's so crazy town, like the number of things that are in there and what they want to do, and the unreality of it. Oh, that reminds me. Let me end off with this. I had this thought earlier. You know, now that we're down to the last 3 months, basically, of the election cycle, things are going to pick up and speed up and heat up and be crazy town for the next 3 months. I advise, by the way, to ignore polling. I mean, you know, it's there, but I hate polling. But one thing I noticed coming out of the Trumpster camp, which I thought was so interesting, and not just a Trumpsterism at all, it's a cult thing, of course, is loaded language and the use of language. But thought-stopping cliches or thought-terminating cliches, remember those, right? Where you have these words or phrases where it just shuts down thinking. These are all over the place right now with these guys. And of course, that's typical for election cycles and propaganda. But really check it out, because they are using in what I found to be the most like shutting down thinking way I think I've ever seen. Communism, socialism, these words are being thrown around to describe the left, the Kamala and Walz, and they're like, you know, you're knowing that that's not true at all and has nothing to do with the reality of the situation, but it's so effective as a thought-stopping cliche for these people. You know, you realize that you can't even engage with them in terms of the definitions of the words or something, because the words don't really mean anything. You know, like that's kind of part of the thing with the thought terminating cliches is the words stop meaning anything. They're just symbols. They're just sounds to represent, you know, that you're doubling down on your belief. I don't know if that sounds right or not, but it sounded funny to me. So I thought I would share that with you. It's just these sometimes the words, I guess the point is sometimes words come out of people's mouths and there really isn't any reason for you to try to argue or engage with it, because they're not even thinking about the word as a word. It's just something they say to reinforce their own belief in the moment. You know, it's not even an argument. It's just a sound. It's funny. It really is, though, isn't it? It's funny. Okay. So I told you about the shows this weekend, and let us wrap up with our critical thinking card for this week. Appeal to nature. Your fallacy is appeal to nature, making the argument that because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. Because it's natural. It's all natural, right? The medicine man rolled into town on his bandwagon offering various natural remedies, such as a very special plain water. He said that it was only natural that people should be wary of artificial medicines, such as antibiotics. I can't have any of those artificial ingredients in my body. All right. That might just be a logical fallacy. Okay, guys. Thanks for coming around. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.